There are these mean old women who sit at home all day, and if anyone walks too close to her lawn, she immediately runs out of the house and starts yelling at them to get away. It's her private property. The neighbors of such an old woman are especially unlucky. If she hears even the slightest sound from the neighbors, she immediately bangs on the door and claims they're exceeding the noise limit, even though it's nowhere near that. She tries to disrupt any of the neighbors' holidays, writing endless complaints to every single authority on the street. So I'm that old woman. And you know what really takes the cake? My grandchildren turned out to be my neighbors. And most of all, they hate their grumpy old neighbor. How did this happen? I'll tell you. Revenge is a pleasant thing, people say. You get your justice, you get your satisfaction, maybe you sleep better at night. Well, I took revenge on my daughter, and I paid for it with 16 years of bone-deep, echoing loneliness. I'm 60 now. I live in a beige little box of a house in a subdivision outside Columbus, Ohio. You know the type. Vinyl siding, 2-car garage, postage stamp front lawn, HOA that cares more about mailbox color than human beings. The kind of place that looks exactly the same in Google Street View as it does out your front window. I've been here for almost 20 years. Long enough for my knees to complain about the stairs and my back to protest when I mow the lawn. Long enough to watch the neighborhood kids grow up, move out, and be replaced with new kids I don't know and don't particularly want to know. I didn't start out as crazy Linda at the end of the cul-de-sac, by the way. I used to be just Linda. Linda who worked 30 years as a medical billing clerk. Linda who raised a daughter on her own, paid every bill on time, never bounced a check, made casseroles for church potlucks. Linda who was exhausted, but hopeful. And then there was Katie. Katie was my only child. I had her at 23, which feels like childhood to me now. Her father was gone before she was born, no tragedy there. He was one of those charming losers who could sell you a dream and then borrow your rent money. The day I found out I was pregnant, I realized I could raise one baby, or two, and I sure as hell wasn't going to raise a grown man. So it was just me and Katie. She was sharp as a tack, quick with comebacks, always the loudest laugh in the room, that kind of bright. But there was another side, too. Impulsive, restless, the type that never reads the instructions, just starts pressing buttons and hopes it works out. As a kid, that meant scraped knees and broken toys. As a teenager, it meant skipped classes, questionable friends, and bottles that didn't have water in them. I saw it early. The way her eyes lit up when she drank at some senior bonfire party she snuck off to. The way she bragged about sneaking liquor out of someone's parents' cabinet. I remember telling her, "Careful, Katie, that stuff has teeth." She rolled her eyes. "Relax, Mom, I'm not you." Funny thing to say, considering I never drank more than a glass of wine at Christmas. I couldn't afford to. I had a kid to keep alive and a job I couldn't lose. But I knew the signs. My brother was an alcoholic. He died at 42 with a liver hard as a rock and a fridge full of cheap beer. I knew that manic sparkle, that melting into the bottle. And I saw it in my daughter. I tried everything I could think of, which was not as much as TV dramas like to pretend. Grounding, curfews, taking the car keys, checking her backpack, smelling her breath, the whole humiliating dance. There were fights. Oh, there were fights. The kind that leave you shaking in your bedroom afterwards, staring at the wall, wondering when your baby learned how to say such cruel things. You're just jealous I actually have a life. You're miserable, so you want me to be miserable too. No wonder Dad left. That last one never stopped stinging, even though I knew the truth. She graduated by the skin of her teeth, got pregnant at 20, a boy first, Evan, then a girl 2 years later, Mia. Different fathers, neither one worth learning a last name. I helped. Of course I helped. Daycare money, babysitting, diapers, midnight emergency runs to Walgreens when the baby had a fever. I kept bailing her out because that's what mothers do, right? That's what I told myself. That this time she'd get it together. That this time she'd see how close to the edge she was standing. But addiction doesn't care about your sacrifices.
It doesn't care about your hope or your lectures or the nights you lie awake listening for your kid's car in the driveway. It just keeps eating. By the time Katie was 24, she had 2 kids, no partner, a part-time job she was always late to, and a DUI. That should have been the wake-up call. It wasn't. 16 years ago, on a muggy August night, she finally went too far. I remember every second like it's pinned behind my eyes. It was almost midnight. I was asleep in this very house, only the furniture was newer and my back didn't hurt as much when I turned over. I woke up to a sound that didn't make sense, like thunder and metal and the world being punched in the gut all at once. The house shook. For a second, all I could think was gas explosion. Tornado? Something huge and impossible. I stumbled out of bed, heart hammering, and smelled dust and gasoline. The front of my house was wrong, tilted, cracked. I turned the corner into the living room, and there it was. Or rather, there she was. My daughter had driven her car into my house. Literally, into it. Half the front wall was caved in. The hood of her rusted Corolla was crumpled like a soda can. The airbag had deployed. The windshield was a spider web of cracks. Katie was slumped over the steering wheel, dazed, eyes unfocused, blood trickling from a cut on her forehead. "Katie!" I screamed, running to her. She blinked at me slowly. "Hey, Mom," she slurred, like she'd just dropped by for coffee. I misjudged the turn. The smell of alcohol hit me in the face. Strong, sour, familiar. I called 911 with shaking fingers. My voice came out too high, like it belonged to someone else. I told them there'd been an accident, that my daughter had crashed into my house. No, I didn't think she was dying. Yes, she was breathing. Yes, I suspected alcohol. Yes, I wanted police. That last part surprised me, even as I said it. But the word was already out there, hanging in the air. Police. When the officers arrived, lights flashing red and blue all over my broken siding, they weren't surprised. They knew her. That hurt more than it should have. "Oh, Katie again?" one of them said under his breath. I caught it anyway. They tested her. Of course they did. She blew way over the limit. The paramedics checked her out, insisted on taking her to the hospital. She cursed and cried, alternating between saying it was no big deal and that everyone was overreacting. I stood in my torn-up living room, hugging myself, watching them load my only child into an ambulance. The car sat there like a guilty animal. The front of my house was destroyed. I could see my front yard through a hole where the wall used to be. The neighbors came out onto their porches, bathrobes and slippers and sleepy staring. I saw the flicker of phones as they took pictures, like a neighborhood show. And somewhere under the shock and the fear and the maternal instinct, something in me snapped. She could have killed someone. If she had veered left instead of right, she could have plowed into the neighbor's house where a toddler slept in a crib by the front window. She could have killed herself. And yeah, I loved her, but I was so tired of wondering when the disaster would hit. I went down to the station the next day. I gave a statement. I didn't sugarcoat it. I told them about the previous DUI, the near misses, the times I'd found the bottles hidden under the sink. When the prosecutor called and said they were filing charges, DUI, property damage, reckless endangerment, I didn't beg them to go easy on her. I said, "Good. She needs to be stopped." The words tasted like rust. I said them anyway. Katie called me later from the jail phone, furious and tearful and hungover. "How could you?" she screamed. "You're my mother." I said, "You could have killed someone. I hit your stupid house, not a person. That's luck, not skill." I'll never forget the silence on the line after that. Cold, final. "You're dead to me." And hung up. I thought that was the worst thing that would come out of that night. It wasn't. I found out about the children 2 weeks later. Not that I didn't know they existed. I'd babysat Evan and Mia, held them when they were tiny, watched cartoons on my old couch. But I found out what the system had done with them. It was a Tuesday. I was at work, going through insurance codes, and trying not to think about the estimate the contractor had just given me to fix the house. It ended in 3 zeros I didn't have. My phone buzzed. A number I didn't recognize.
Franklin County Children's Services. The woman on the phone was polite, rehearsed, too smooth for the words she was saying. As part of your daughter's case, previous history, safety concerns, prior neglect reports. Children had been removed from the home 2 years ago, placed in foster care, then adopted. Rights terminated, case closed. I remember sitting there, staring at the gray cubicle wall, listening like she was reading me the weather. Partly cloudy with a chance of your life collapsing. "I'm sorry," I interrupted. "What do you mean, adopted?" "They've been legally adopted by another family," the woman said. "They're no longer in your daughter's custody. No one told me." My voice sounded flat, like it was coming from down the hallway. "I'm their grandmother." There was a pause, papers rustling. "It looks like you weren't listed as a suitable placement," she said. "Your daughter wasn't cooperative, and when the case was active, well, these things move quickly. I'm sorry." Suitable placement. Like I was an old couch they'd decided to toss instead of reupholster. I hung up eventually. I went to the bathroom and stared at myself in the mirror. 54. Lines around my mouth. Tired eyes. 2 grandchildren somewhere in this city, or another state, with different last names and different parents. And a daughter sitting in jail blaming me for everything. I thought about fighting it, getting a lawyer, demanding information. But I knew how the system worked. I worked low wage, I lived modest, I was single. Those things get used against you in custody cases, no matter how many casseroles you've baked or how many nights you've stayed up with coughing kids. And another thought wormed its way in, one I hate myself for even now. Maybe they're better off. Maybe somewhere they're with people who don't drink themselves stupid, with 2 parents instead of one sinking ship, with a backyard and swing sets and birthday parties that don't get ruined because mom passed out on the couch. I told myself not to disturb them, not to drag them back into the mess of our lives. It would be better this way, I thought, for them at least. So I didn't look. I kept my head down. I paid off my house repairs dollar by dollar, side gig by side gig. Katie went to prison for 3 years, got out, was arrested again 6 months later. I stopped taking her calls by then. The last I heard, she moved down south with a boyfriend and then nothing. Silence. Like she'd dropped off the edge of the world. I assumed she was dead by now. You don't keep playing chicken with a bottle and win forever. 16 years passed. I got older. My world got smaller. I retired early when my knees made my commute hell. I clipped coupons. I argued with the cable company. I fell asleep to the TV most nights because silence made my thoughts too loud. My character got worse with every year, I'll admit that. When you spend too much time alone, little things start feeling like big insults. Someone not returning your cart at the grocery store becomes a personal affront. A barking dog turns into targeted harassment. The HOA gave me something to latch onto, something that came with rules and letters and a place to direct anger that was really meant for myself. Trash cans left out past 9 a.m. on pickup day? I reported them. Broken blinds visible from the street? I sent an email. Someone painted their front door a color not on the approved palette? Oh, I absolutely called that out in the monthly meeting. The board loved me. "We need more homeowners like you, Linda, people who care about standards." They thought I was on their side. Truth is, I just needed to feel some control over something, even if it was just the height of a mailbox post. I had no friends. Not really. I nodded to the woman who walked her golden retriever every morning. I exchanged small talk with the clerk at the pharmacy. But real friends, people who knew about Katie, about the crash, about the hollow place in my chest where my family should have been, no. Neighbors whispered. Kids crossed to the other side of the street when they passed my house. I heard the names: witch, psycho, cranky old bag. They weren't entirely wrong. So when the Wilsons moved in next door, I already had armor built up. I saw the U-Haul, watched from behind my curtains as they unloaded their lives. Youngish couple, mid-30s. She had a messy ponytail and a world's okayest mom t-shirt. He had a beard and a baseball cap, and an air of someone trying hard.
2 kids, a teenage boy, all limbs and attitude, a younger girl, probably 12 or 13, with headphones around her neck and chipped black nail polish. They were loud. Of course they were. Moving is loud. Kids are loud. Life is loud. I told myself to let it go. Just this once, I thought. Don't be that woman. But habits are like ivy. They grow into the cracks of your personality. The first conflict started with a baseball. It was a Saturday afternoon in late spring. The air was warm, the grass an offensively bright green. I was in the kitchen, rinsing dishes, thinking about nothing and everything at once. I heard the kids next door outside. The thump of a ball, shouts, laughter. I tried to ignore it, put on the TV a little louder. But every cheer, every "nice one, bro," dug into my nerves like a mosquito bite I couldn't scratch. That's when it happened. A crack. Glass shattering. The kind of sound that makes your stomach drop. I spun around. The front window, over the living room couch, was a spider web of broken glass, sunlight glinting on the shards on my hardwood floor. A baseball rolled to a stop by my coffee table. My heart started racing. Not the scared kind of racing, the furious kind. The kind that felt disturbingly familiar, like the night I stood in front of a smashed wall and a crumpled car. I marched outside, baseball in hand. The boy next door froze mid-stride in the driveway. The younger girl stood behind him, eyes wide. The father was by the garage, holding a rake uselessly. "Which one of you?" I demanded, holding up the ball like evidence in court. The boy swallowed. "It was me, ma'am. I'm really sorry. Do you have any idea how dangerous that was?" My voice was sharp enough to cut. "You could have hit me. You could have broken more than just a window." The father stepped forward, hands up in apology. "I'm so sorry, ma'am. We'll pay for the damage. It was an accident." "That's what they always say," I snapped. The words were out before I could stop them. It was an accident. I misjudged the turn. The phrase tasted sour in my mouth. The man blinked, clearly confused. "Seriously, we'll take care of it," he said, glancing at the shattered glass visible through my window. "I'll call someone first thing Monday, get a replacement. Or if you have a company you prefer." "It's not just about the window," I said. "You are responsible for what happens on your property. Teach your children basic respect." The girl's eyes flashed. "It was one ball. You act like we drove a car into your living room." My throat closed. For a second, I couldn't breathe. The boy elbowed her, hissing her name. The dad shot her a warning look. "I said I'm sorry," she added, less bravely. I turned and walked back inside without another word. My hands were trembling. I heard the father call after me, "I'll come by later to talk about payment." I shut the door. Standing in my living room, looking at the crack in the glass and the baseball on my floor, something twisted in my chest. This is not happening again, I thought. No more damage, no more chaos, no more people crashing into my life and leaving me to clean up afterward. I decided right then that I would not let this go. I called the HOA first. Of course I did. Children playing unsupervised in the street, property damage, potential safety violations. The president was sympathetic. We actually don't regulate kids playing, Linda, but if there's property damage, there is, I said. Broken window, ball from their yard, I expect them to pay, but I wanted it on record. She promised to note it. Then I called my insurance, even though the deductible would probably swallow half the cost anyway. I made an appointment with a glass company. I gathered up the shards and vacuumed every corner until there wasn't a single glittering speck left. Near dinner time, there was a knock on my door. I knew who it would be before I opened it. The father stood there with a forced smile and an envelope in his hand. "Hi again," he said. "We're really sorry about earlier. I got an estimate online for what a window replacement might cost, and I put some cash in here to cover it. If it's more, let me know, and we'll make up the difference." He held the envelope like an offering to an angry god. I took it, but didn't open it. "Fine," I said, "but you need to control your children. This is a quiet neighborhood." He hesitated.
"We'll try to keep it down. We're still settling in. The kids need discipline," I interrupted. His jaw tightened slightly, just a flicker. "Have a good evening, ma'am." He left. From the front window, temporarily taped up with plastic while I waited for the real repair, I watched the girl pacing in their driveway, gesturing angrily as she talked to him. The boy just stood there, hands in his pockets, shoulders hunched. I couldn't hear what they were saying, but I could imagine. "She's insane." I said I was sorry. "Why did we have to move to this neighborhood? I hate it here." I told myself I didn't care. But my stomach felt heavy, like I'd swallowed a stone. The noise didn't stop, of course. Life rarely obliges you just because you're irritated. There were more games in the street. Not with baseballs anymore, apparently they'd learned that much, but with basketballs, scooters, skateboards. The boy, Ethan, I heard someone call him, had friends over, their voices carrying through open windows. The girl, Mia, I eventually learned, played music too loud in her room, the bass faintly thumping against the thin wall that separated our houses. I started keeping a log. Dates, times, description of noise. Car doors slamming after 10 p.m. Loud laughter on a school night. A skateboard clacking on the sidewalk at 7 a.m. on a Sunday. I filed complaints with the HOA. I called the non-emergency police line once when the kids were outside past curfew. "They're just sitting on the porch, ma'am," the officer said, looking slightly embarrassed. "Not exactly a disturbance." "They're shouting," I insisted. "People have to work in the morning." "It's summer," he pointed out. I gave him the kind of look that sends interns scurrying in office hallways. He cleared his throat and promised to have a word with them. The parents started giving my house a wide berth. They'd usher the kids inside when I came out to get my mail. I caught the mother jolting and doing a quick turn when she realized I was on my porch. It should have made me feel powerful. Instead, it made the emptiness in my chest feel deeper. Every time I saw that family laughing on their front lawn, grilling in the backyard, loading into their car for some weekend outing, it was like pressing on a bruise I'd been pretending had healed. That should have been my life. Not with them specifically, but with my daughter, with my grandchildren, with the future I'd imagined when I first held Katie in the hospital and counted her fingers and toes. Instead, I had noise logs and HOA bylaws printed in a binder. The turning point came on a Tuesday evening in September. It was one of those Ohio evenings where summer and fall were wrestling, humid, but with an edge of coolness when the wind picked up. I was out front pulling weeds, because it was either that or scroll through TV channels I didn't care about. The sun was low, turning the street gold. Next door, the kids were in the driveway. Ethan was shooting hoops at a net attached above the garage. Mia sat on the steps, writing something in a notebook. I could hear their voices. Teenage complaints carry like opera. "I'm not going. You can't make me. Mia, come on. You know how Mom will freak out again. Just go to the stupid meeting. I'm not going to sit there while they read off all the ways we're disrupting the community. That old bat is obsessed with us. I froze, my hand locked around a clump of crabgrass. Ethan shot the ball. It bounced off the rim. It's not just her. The HOA has rules. Yeah, and guess who keeps reminding them? Mia snapped. You heard Dad. She sent like 20 emails last month. Who does that? Normal people talk to their neighbors. She just tattles. I yanked the weed out harder than necessary. I hate her, Mia added. If I ever wind up in a movie, she'll be the villain, crazy neighbor lady. I told myself I'd heard worse. I had. Some of it from my own kid. Still, something in me didn't want to hear any more. I straightened up, dusting my knees, about to head inside. That's when I heard the boy say it. Careful, Mom will say she's just trying to keep us safe or some crap. You know how she gets about drunk drivers and stuff. My brain snapped to attention. What does drunk driving have to do with anything? Mia asked. Ethan caught the ball again, leaned against the hoop post, and lowered his voice. You know how Mom's mom died, right? I mean, he glanced toward the house.
Her real mom. I went very still. Mia sighed loudly. We're not supposed to talk about her. I know, but you know she died because she drove into somebody's house, right? Drunk off her ass? He said it casually, like reciting trivia. The words hit me like a punch. House. Drunk. Mom's mom. My heart started pounding at the base of my throat. Yeah, Mia said quickly. I've heard the story. Psycho grandma turned her in, she crashed into someone's living room, blah, blah, consequences. It's not like we knew her. She's just the villain in Mom's sad backstory. Psycho grandma? My knees nearly gave out. I gripped the edge of my flower bed to steady myself. They're both villains, Ethan said. Grandma for turning her in, Mom for telling us that story like it was some cautionary tale instead of free therapy content. Mia snorted. Grandma must have been really awful, like next level. Probably like Linda, Ethan said. Honestly, I bet they'd be best friends. They laughed. The sound felt like glass grinding in a wound. I walked slowly back into my house, my ears ringing. Psycho grandma, drunk driving, crashed into a house, turned her in. There are only so many people in one city who do something like that. Only so many daughters who plow their car into a living room and go to prison afterward. Only so many grandmothers who marched into a police station and told the truth, even when it burned. My hands were shaking so badly I had to sit down on the couch. No, it couldn't be. There was no way. And yet, I didn't sleep that night. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, the faint wash of streetlights slicing through my blinds. My mind went in circles. What were the odds? 16 years ago, my grandchildren were taken by children's services and adopted out. I didn't know where. I'd chosen not to know. That was my own little act of cowardice disguised as sacrifice. Now, next door to me, there was a family with 2 kids roughly the right ages. A boy about 17, a girl about 15. Their mother had a real mom whose story involved drunk driving into a house and a grandmother who turned her in. I knew exactly one story like that. My own. I got up around 3 a.m. and dug through the box at the back of my closet, the one I hadn't opened in years. It smelled like dust and old paper. Inside was everything I hadn't been able to throw away. Katie's birth certificate, my hospital bracelet, a photo of her at 3 in overalls, grinning with pigtails crooked, a folded copy of the newspaper article about the crash, woman sentenced after crashing car into mother's home while intoxicated. My finger traced the grainy black and white picture of my house with its caved-in wall. My house that, 16 years later, bore no visible scars, unlike its owner.
On the back of the article, I'd written in blue pen, "Never forget why you did it." I grabbed another folder, the court documents, the ones I'd forced myself to request: DUI, property damage, endangerment. Then a thin packet from Children's Services. It didn't say much. Case numbers, dates, a vague line about 2 minor children placed in long-term care. No names for privacy. No final custody order. By then, I'd stopped asking. I stared at the date the kids were removed, cross-checked it with my hazy memory. Evan was 4, Mia was 2. 16 years ago. So if that was them, they'd be about the ages of the kids next door. The boy's broad shoulders, the girl's sharp cheekbones. I thought of Evan's toddler roundness, Mia's baby face. Would they have grown into these faces? I didn't know. I'd never allowed myself to picture it. I sat there on my bedroom floor until the first light of dawn seeped through the curtains. By the time the sun was fully up, I'd made a decision. I needed proof. Now, when 60-year-old women start investigating things, people tend to underestimate them. They picture confusion, forgetfulness, someone who can't work the TV remote. I worked in medical billing for 30 years. I know how to sift through information. I know how to follow a paper trail. I started with the obvious. I Googled Franklin County adoption records. Of course, those were sealed, but some public information slipped through the cracks. Fundraiser photos, school newsletters, church bulletins. Next, I went to the HOA office under the guise of updating my contact information. It was a boring gray room with fake plants and a bored receptionist.
"While I'm here," I said, laying on the sweet old lady voice thick, "I just wanted to double-check my file. Ever since my daughter moved away, I'm all alone, and my memory—" I let my voice trail off, giving a little laugh. The receptionist smiled sympathetically. "Of course, Miss Warren. Let me pull that up." She clicked around on her computer. I craned my neck just enough to see the homes on either side of mine on the screen. There it was. 127 Maple Lane, Linda Warren. 125 Maple Lane, Daniel and Rebecca Wilson. Wilson, not their original last name, if my theory was right, but maybe the adoptive one. I jotted it down in a tiny notebook I kept in my purse. Next stop, the library. I hadn't been there in years, which is a shame because it still smelled like my childhood. Paper and dust and quiet. On one of the public computers, I searched Rebecca Wilson Adoption Columbus, Rebecca Wilson Foster Parent, Wilson Family Maple Lane School Newsletter. Most of it was junk. But then I found a digital PDF of a PTA newsletter from the local high school 3 years back. Meet our new PTA volunteers. There was a photo, blurry but recognizable, of my next-door neighbor, hair shorter and less messy, smiling for the camera. Beneath it, Rebecca Wilson, proud adoptive mom of 2 amazing teenagers, has been part of our community for over 10 years. My heart started pounding. Adoptive mom? 2 teenagers over 10 years? If she'd adopted them 10 years before that newsletter, that would have been roughly 16 years ago, right around the time my grandchildren were removed. I clicked through the rest of the file. Another page had a blurb. Rebecca and her husband Daniel became parents through the Franklin County Foster to Adopt program and are passionate advocates for children in care. Franklin County, Foster to Adopt. My vision went the slightest bit blurry. I knew it wasn't hard proof. Kids enter the system all the time. There are lots of tragic stories. It could be coincidence. But then I found an old article from a small local paper about National Adoption Month. There was a quote from Rebecca. "We brought home our son and daughter when they were just 4 and 2 when Children's Services took them. They've been the joy and challenge of our lives ever since." 4 and 2. Evan and Mia were 4 and 2 when Children's Services took them. I sat back in the stiff library chair and stared at the screen. That was it then. Probability had stepped aside and let gut instinct take over. The noisy neighbors I'd been reporting, the kids whose laughter grated on me, the teenagers I'd branded as disrespectful, they were almost certainly my grandchildren. The universe has a twisted sense of humor. For 3 days, I did nothing. I went through the motions, made my coffee, paid my electric bill, watched reruns of shows I'd seen 10 times, and every time I heard a laugh from next door, every time a car door slammed or a screen door squeaked, my stomach clenched. I'd wanted revenge on someone for so long, I hadn't noticed I'd become its prisoner. First, revenge on my daughter. I wanted her to finally face consequences, to stop hurting people, to stop making me complicit in her chaos. I got my wish. She went to prison. And in the process, I lost her, maybe forever. Then, revenge on the faceless world that had taken my grandchildren and hidden them away. I turned that bitterness inward, let it sour my view of everyone. The HOA, the kids on the street, the dog that pooped on my lawn. Finally, revenge on the Wilson kids for daring to exist loudly within earshot of my empty house. Now I knew the truth, or 90% of it anyway, and I was frozen. What was I supposed to do? March next door, bang on the door and announce, "Hi, remember the drunk driver who crashed into my house and went to prison? I'm her mother. You're my grandchildren." That would go well, especially with adoptive parents who already saw me as the witch of the cul-de-sac. Another thought scared me even more. What if I was wrong? Imagine dropping a bomb like that and then finding out I'd misread everything. That would be beyond cruel. And under all that, scratching at the door of my mind was a quieter fear. What if I was right and they wanted nothing to do with me? What if I was the villain in their story too? The universe, once again, did not wait for me to make up my mind. A week later, the HOA sent out notices about the upcoming quarterly meeting. They slid the envelopes under our doors like jury summons. The morning of the meeting, I saw Rebecca loading files into a tote bag by her car. She looked tired, dark circles under her eyes.
The kind of exhaustion you get from juggling jobs and teenagers and an overactive homeowners association. I hesitated behind my curtains, watching her. Then I saw something else. The way she paused for a second, leaning on the car door, eyes closed, taking a breath like she was bracing herself before a fight. It hit me. The realization that in my obsessive noise complaints, I hadn't just been targeting the kids. I'd been piling weight onto the shoulders of a woman who was probably already carrying more than her fair share. The woman who'd raised my grandchildren when I couldn't, when their own mother wouldn't. I grabbed my purse and the thick binder of rules I always brought to meetings like a shield. But this time, I wasn't as sure I knew what side I was on. The meeting was held in the gloomy little community center at the front of the subdivision. Fluorescent lights buzzing, folding chairs scraping the floor, stale coffee in a big silver urn. About 20 homeowners showed up. Retired couples, young families, one guy who always wore a Bluetooth headset for no reason. I took my usual seat near the front. Rebecca was a few rows back, flipping through some papers. Daniel sat next to her, tapping a pen against his knee. The president, Janice, a woman who treated the HOA charter like scripture, called the meeting to order. We went through the usual agenda: landscaping contracts, winter salt budget, someone's illegal shed. Then we got to resident concerns. Janice cleared her throat. We have received multiple complaints about noise disturbances and unsupervised minors on Maple Lane. I felt a dozen eyes flick toward my row. Janice glanced at me. "Linda, you submitted several of those. Would you like to speak?" Every other time, I'd happily stood up and laid out my case. Dates, times, incidents, my voice steady and righteous. This time, my legs felt like concrete. "Actually," another voice said, before I could force words out, "I would." Rebecca stood. She didn't look like the PTA newsletter photo. Her hair was pulled back in a messy knot, and she wore no makeup. But there was a steadiness in her posture that hadn't been there when she first moved in. "I'd like to address the complaints about my children," she said, holding a paper that I recognized as my own printed emails. Janice shifted, caught off guard. "Of course, Mrs. Wilson." Rebecca took a breath.
We moved here because we were told it was a family-friendly neighborhood. We have 2 teenagers. Teenagers make noise. They play basketball. They laugh. They have friends. A couple of parents in the room nodded faintly. We respect quiet hours. We've talked to them about being considerate. We kept them inside after that baseball broke Miss Warren's window, and we paid for the repairs without question. But some of these complaints, she skimmed the printouts. Voices heard at 7:45 p.m., kids sitting on front steps after dark, basketball dribbling for more than 10 consecutive minutes. There were a few awkward chuckles. That's not a noise violation. That's life. Janice fidgeted. We do want to make sure everyone feels comfortable in the community, including my kids, Rebecca said, her voice tightening. They already feel like they're always one step away from losing everything. They don't need to be told they're a nuisance for existing. The room went still. I knew that feeling, that one step from losing everything feeling. It's the soundtrack of growing up with addiction in your family. I glanced down at my binder, at the neatly tabbed sections, at the list of complaints I'd typed up like a prosecutor building a case. What the hell was I doing? My heart was beating fast, my palms were sweaty. I felt like I was standing at 2 doors, and I had to pick one. The familiar one that led to bitterness and isolation, or the terrifying one that led to I didn't even know. Janice opened her mouth. We do take all complaints seriously. That's enough, I heard myself say. The words came out louder than I meant. Heads turned. I stood up slowly. My knees creaked. I raised my chin anyway. I'd like to withdraw my complaints. Janice blinked. Linda, are you sure? You were very concerned about... Yes, I said firmly. I was. I overreacted. It felt like swallowing a cactus. An apology, however sideways, did not come easy to me. I looked at Rebecca. Her eyebrows were raised slightly, cautious. I've had bad experiences with cars and houses. It makes me jumpy. And lonely people can start hearing noise where there isn't any. A few people smiled.
Someone snorted. I kept going. I'm not saying teenagers should be allowed to set off fireworks at midnight, I added, earning a ripple of laughter. But kids sitting on their front steps, that's not a violation. That's what these neighborhoods were built for. Janice looked conflicted. Her rule-loving soul did not like mid-meeting plot twists. Well, if that's how you feel, she said finally, we can close this item for now with the understanding that quiet hours still apply and any egregious violations. Yes, I said, save the bylaws. I know them by heart. More laughter. The tension in the room loosened, just a fraction. I sat down. My heart was pounding. Rebecca stared at me like I'd grown a second head. After the meeting, as people lingered, murmuring about snow removal and mail theft, I gathered my binder and headed for the door. I could feel her behind me before she spoke. Ms. Warren? I turned. Rebecca stood there, hugging her tote bag. Now that I was closer, I could see the faint lines around her eyes, the worry creases between her brows. She looked older than the PTA photo, but who didn't after the last decade? Yes, I said. She swallowed. Thank you for withdrawing the complaints. I know you didn't have to. My throat felt dry. I did have to, I said quietly. I was wrong. Her eyes widened slightly. Apologies from me were apparently as rare as comets. I misdirected some old anger onto your kids. That's not an excuse, but it's the truth. She studied my face like she was trying to decide if this was some new tactic. Have we met before? She asked suddenly. I mean, outside of the neighborhood. You look familiar. My heart stuttered. Maybe at the grocery store, I deflected. Or the library. The world's small. Maybe, she said, though she didn't sound convinced. Anyway, I added briskly, tell your children they have my tolerance, as long as they don't play baseball near my windows. Her mouth quirked. Deal. I could have walked away then. I almost did. Then I heard my own voice in my head. What if this is your last chance? not just to fix things, but to stop being the villain in everybody's story. Rebecca, I said, surprising us both by using her first name, can I ask you something? Sure. How old were your kids when you adopted them? I kept my tone casual, like asking about their favorite ice cream. Her shoulders tensed. Why? Just curious, I said. You mentioned foster to adopt in one of those PTA newsletters. I saw it posted in the library a while back. Her face softened at that. Oh, right. They were 4 and 2 when we brought them home. 4 and 2. My palms went damp. I see, I said. Must have been a big adjustment. She laughed, a short, self-deprecating sound. Yeah, we thought we were prepared. She shook her head. No one's prepared. But they're good kids. They've been through a lot. I nodded, fighting to keep my composure. I'm sure they have. She hesitated. Their birth mom wasn't well, she added, like she felt she had to justify their past. Addiction. Some pretty bad stuff. Their grandmother, well, she grimaced. Let's just say from what I've heard, the apple didn't fall far from the tree. My stomach twisted. People say a lot of things when they're hurt. Sometimes, she agreed, but drunk driving into someone's house, that's not exactly rumor. She said it lightly, but the words hit like falling bricks. I forced a smile that didn't reach my eyes. No, that's definitely not rumor. We stood there for a moment, 2 women bound by a stranger's story, except it wasn't a stranger. She just didn't know that. Thank you again, Rebecca said, for, not being the villain at the HOA meeting. Don't give me too much credit, I said. I've had plenty of villain days. She smiled, then headed out into the crisp night to join her family. I watched her go, feeling like I was standing on the edge of a cliff I'd built myself. I didn't tell them that night, or the next day, or the next week. Instead, I did something that, for me, was almost as hard as confessing. I tried to be neighborly. I started small. When the kids played basketball after school, I didn't write it down. When I heard laughter through the wall, I turned up my TV instead of grinding my teeth. One afternoon, I brought my trash cans in at the same time Daniel was out front. Good afternoon, he said warily. Hello, I replied, then added, your lawn looks good. The fescue recovered nicely from the summer heat. He blinked.
So, another story of my grandmother has ended. And be clicking here, you will have when more such stories.